of the attention and care which the Most Holy Mary bestowed upon the fruit of her womb and some happenings in regard to it. As soon as Our Lady and Queen issued from the trance in which she had conceived the eternal incarnate Word, she prostrated herself upon the earth and adored him in her womb, as I have already said in the 12th chapter. This adoration she continued all her life, commencing it at midnight every day and repeating these genuflections 300 times until the same hour of the following night, and oftener whenever she had the opportunity. In this she was even more diligent during the 9 months of her divine pregnancy. In order to comply entirely with the new duties consequent upon the guarding of this treasure of the Eternal Father in the virginal bridal chamber, she directed all her attention toward frequent and fervent prayer. She was solicitous in sending up many and reiterated petitions to be able worthily to preserve the heavenly treasure confided to her. Accordingly, she dedicated anew to the Lord her soul and all her faculties, practicing all virtues in a heroic and supreme degree, so that she caused new astonishment in the angels. She also consecrated and offered up all the motions of her body to the worship and service of the infant God-man within her. Whether she ate, slept, labored, or rested, she did it all for the nourishment and conservation of her sweetest Son, and in all these actions she was inflamed more and more with divine love. On the day following the Incarnation, the 1,000 guardian angels which attended upon Most Holy Mary appeared in corporal form, and with profound humility adored their incarnate King in the womb of the Mother. Her also they acknowledged anew as their Queen and Mistress, and rendered her due homage and reverence, saying, quote, "Now, O Lady, thou art the true Ark of the Testament," Deuteronomy 10:5, "since thou containest the lawgiver himself, and preservest the manna of heaven, which is our true bread. Receive, O Queen, our congratulations on account of thy dignity and happiness, for which we also thank the Most High, since he has befittingly chosen thee for his mother and his tabernacle. We offer anew to thee our homage and service, and wish to obey thee as vassals and servants of the supreme and omnipotent King, whose mother thou art." Unquote. These protestations and homages of the holy angels excited in the Mother of Wisdom incomparable sentiments of humility, gratitude, and love of God. For in this most prudent heart, where all things were weighed with the scales of the sanctuary according to their true value and weight, this reverence and acknowledgement of the angelic spirits proclaiming her as their queen was held in high esteem. Although it was a greater thing to see herself the mother of the King and Lord of all creation, yet all her blessings and dignities were made more evident by these demonstrations and homages of the holy angels. The angels rendered this homage as executors and ministers of the will of the Most High. When their Queen and Lady, and Our Lady, was alone, all of them attended upon her in corporal form, and they assisted her in her outward actions and occupations, and when she was engaged in manual labor, they administered to her what was needed. Whenever she happened to eat alone in the absence of St. Joseph, they waited upon her at her poor table and at her humble meals. Everywhere they followed her and formed an escort and helped her in the services rendered to St. Joseph. Amid all these favors and obsequious, I don't know that word, attendance, the Heavenly Lady did not forget to ask permission from the Master of Masters for all her operations and undertakings, and to employ his direction and assistance. So exact and so well governed were all her exercises, according to the plenitude of perfection, that the Lord alone could comprehend and properly weigh them. Besides the ordinary guidance during the time in which she carried in her most holy womb the incarnate Word, she felt his divine presence in diverse ways, all admirable and most sweet. Sometimes he showed himself to her by abstractive vision, as mentioned above. At other times she saw and beheld him as he was now present in the virginal temple, united hypostatically with the human nature. At other times the most holy humanity was manifested to her as if in a crystalline monstrance, composed of her own maternal womb and purest body. This kind of vision afforded special consolation and delight to the great Queen. At other times she perceived how the glory of his most holy soul overflowed into the body of the divine child, communicating to it some of the effects of its own blessedness and glory, and how the clarity and light of the natural body of her Son passed over in a wonderfully sweet, ineffable, and divine manner into herself as mother. This favor transformed her entirely into another kind of being, inflaming her heart and causing in her such effects as no created capacity can explain. Let the intellect of the highest seraphim extend and dilate as much as it may, it would nevertheless find itself overwhelmed by this glory. Proverbs 25:27. For the entire being of the heavenly queen was an intellectual and animated heaven, and in her was summarized the divine glory and greatness in a measure that even the vast confines of the heavens themselves could not encompass. These and other prerogatives alternated and succeeded each other in accordance with the exercises of the Divine Mother, and such variety as suited the different kinds of work which she performed. All her doings, whether spiritual or manual or otherwise of the body, served her God or benefited her neighbors, being undertaken and accomplished by this prudent maiden to produce a harmony admirable and most sweet before the Lord, and wonderful to the angelic spirits. And when by the disposition of the Most High the mistress of the world returned to a more natural state, she suffered mortal agony, caused by the force and violence of her love, for to her could in truth be applied what Solomon says in the name of the spouse, quote, "Stay me with flowers, compass me about with apples," unquote. Canticles 2:5. And thus it would happen that by the piercing wounds of the sweet arrows of love she was brought near to the ending of her life. But in this necessity the powerful arm of the Most High was wont to strengthen her in a supernatural manner. Sometimes, in order to afford her sensible relief, innumerable birds would come to visit her by the command of the Lord. As if they were endowed with intellect, they would salute her by their lively movements, and dividing into harmonious choirs would furnish her with sweetest music, and they would wait for her blessing before again dispersing. This happened in a special manner soon after she had conceived the divine word, as if they wished to congratulate her on her dignity in imitation of the angels. The mistress of all creatures on that day spoke to the different kinds of birds and commanded them to remain and praise with her the Creator in thanksgiving for the creation and for the existence and beauty given to them, and to sing his praises for their conservation. Immediately they obeyed her as their mistress, and anew they began to form choirs, singing in sweetest harmony, and bowed low to the ground to worship their Creator and honor the mother who bore him in her womb. They were accustomed to bring flowers to her in their beaks and place them into her hands, waiting until she should command them to sing or to be silent according to her wishes. It also happened that in bad weather some birds would come and seek the protection of the heavenly lady, and she took them in and nourished them in her admirable innocence, glorifying the Creator of all things. That's precious. All our weak ignorance must not be estranged at these wonders, for though the incidents might be called small, the purpose of the Most High are great and venerable in all his works, and also the works of our most prudent Queen were great, no matter of what kind they might have been. And who is so presumptuous as to ignore the importance of knowing how much of God's essence and perfections are manifest in the existence of all the creatures? How important it is to seek him and find him, to bless him and magnify him in all his creatures as admirable, powerful, generous, and holy. Why should it not be our duty to imitate Mary, who overlooked no time, place, or occasion to attain this object? And how also shall our ungrateful forgetfulness not be confounded, and our hardness of heart not be softened? How can our listless heart fail to be aroused when we see ourselves reprehended and urged for very shame to thankfulness by the irrational creatures? Merely for the slight participation of the divinity that consists in bare existence, they proclaim his praises without intermission, whereas we men, who are made to the image and likeness of God, furnished with the powers of knowing him and enjoying him eternally, forget him so far as not even to know him, and instead of serving him, offend him. Thus it comes that in no wise can men be preferred to the brute animals, since they have been worse than the brutes. Psalms 48:13. Instruction given by our most holy Queen and Lady. My daughter, thou hast received my instruction until now in order to desire and strive after the heavenly science, which I wish thee so earnestly to acquire, and which shall teach thee to understand profoundly what decorous reverence is due to God. I remind thee once more that this science is very hard to learn and little coveted by men on account of their ignorance, for thence to their great loss it arises that, in conversing with the Most High, or rendering him service or worship, they fail to form a worthy concept of his infinite greatness, and to free themselves from the darksome images of their earthly occupations, which make them torpid and carnal, unworthy and unfit for the magnificent intercourse with the supernal deity. And this ill-bred coarseness entails another disorder, namely, that whenever they converse with their neighbors, they do it without order, measure, or discretion, become entangled in their outward actions, and losing the memory and presence of their Creator in the excitement of their passions, are completely entangled in what is earthly. I desire, therefore, my dearest, that thou fly from this danger, and learn the science of the immutable being and infinite attributes of God. In such a way must thou study him and unite that In such a way must thou study him and unite thyself to him, that no created being will come between thy soul and the true and highest good. At all times and in all places, occupations and operations, thou must keep him in sight, without releasing him from the intimate embrace of thy heart. Canticles 3:4. Therefore I command thee to treat him with a magnanimous heart, with decorum and reverence, with deep-felt fear of the soul. And whatever pertains to his divine worship, I desire that thou handle with all attention and care. Above all, in order to enter into his presence by prayer and petitions, free thyself from all sensible and earthly images. And since human frailty cannot always remain constant in the force of love, nor always experience the sweet violence of its movements on account of its earthly nature, thou shouldest seek other assistance, such as will help thee toward the same end of finding thy God. Such help, for instance, is afforded by his praise in the beauty of the heavens and of the stars, in the variety of the plants, in the pleasant vista of the fields, in the forces of the elements, and especially in the exalted nature of the angels and in the glory of the saints. But bear continually in mind especially this particular caution, not to seek any earthly alleviation in any event or in any labor which thou art to undergo, nor to indulge in any diversion coming from human creatures, and especially not in those coming from men, for on account of thy naturally weak and yielding character, so much adverse to giving pain, thou placest thyself in danger of exceeding and overstepping the limit of what is allowed or just, following, more than is proper for the religious spouses of my most holy Son, thy sensible likings. The risks of this negligence all the human creatures incur, for if full reins are given to frail human nature, it would not give heed to reason, not to the true light of the Spirit, but forgetting them entirely, it would blindly follow the impulse of its passions and pleasures. Against this general danger is provided the enclosure and retirement of the souls consecrated to my Son and Lord, in order to cut off the root of those unhappy and disgraceful occasions for those religious who would willingly seek them and entangle themselves in them. Thy recreations, my dearest, and those of thy sister religious must be free from such danger and deadly poison. Seek always those which shalt find in the secret of thy breast, and in the chamber of thy beloved, who is faithful in consoling, which thou shalt find in the secret of thy breast, and in the chamber of thy beloved, who is faithful in consoling the sorrowful and in assisting the afflicted. Most Holy Mary is informed of the will of the Lord, that she visit Holy Elizabeth. She asks Saint Joseph for permission to go, remaining silent about all that had happened to her. By the words of the heavenly messenger, the Archangel Gabriel, Most Holy Mary had been informed that her cousin Elizabeth, who was held to be sterile, had conceived a son, and that she was already in the 6th month of her pregnancy. Afterwards, in one of the intellectual visions, the Most High revealed to her that in a miraculous birth Elizabeth would bring forth a son who would be great before the Lord, Luke 1:15, a prophet and forerunner of the incarnate Word. Also other great mysteries of the holiness and of the personality of St. John were revealed to her. On this same occasion, and on others, the heavenly Queen was informed that it would be agreeable and pleasing to the Lord if she would visit her cousin, in order that as well Elizabeth as also the child in her womb might be sanctified by the presence of their Redeemer. For his majesty was anxious to communicate the benefits of his coming into the world and his merits to his precursor, in order to make of him, as it were, the well-seasoned first fruit of his redemption. At the news of this sacramental mystery, the most prudent virgin, with admirable jubilee of spirit, rendered thanks to the Lord for such great condescension and favor vouchsafed to the soul of the precursor and prophet, and to his mother Elizabeth. Signifying her readiness to fulfill the divine pleasure, she spoke to his majesty and said, quote, Most high Lord, beginning and cause of all good, let thy name be eternally glorified, acknowledged, and praised by all the nations. I, the least of thy creatures, give thee humble thanks for the liberal kindness which thou wishest to show to thy servant Elizabeth and to the son of her womb. If it is according to the promptings of thy condescension that I serve thee in this work, I stand prepared, my Lord, to obey eagerly thy divine mandates. Unquote. The Most High answered her, quote, My dove and my beloved, elect among creatures, truly I say to thee that on account of thy intercession and thy love, I will, as a father and as most liberal God, take care of thy cousin Elizabeth and of the son who is to be born of her. I will choose him as my prophet and as the precursor of the Word, which is made man in thee. I will look upon them as belonging to thee and intimately connected with thyself. Therefore I wish that my and thy only begotten go to see the mother, in order to free the son from the chains of the first sin, and in order that, before the common and ordinary time decreed for other men, his voice and praise may sound up to my ears. Canticles 2:14. And that the mysteries of the incarnation and redemption may be revealed to his sanctified soul. Therefore I wish thee to visit Elizabeth, for we three persons of the blessed Trinity have chosen her son for great deeds conformable to our pleasure. Unquote. To this command of the Lord, the most obedient mother responded, quote, Thou knowest, my Lord and God, that all the desires of my heart seek but thy divine pleasure, and that I wish to fulfill diligently whatever thou commandest to thy humble servant. Allow me, my God, to ask permission from my husband Joseph, and that I make this journey according to his will and direction, and in order that I may not diverge from what is thy pleasure, thou govern me during that journey in all my actions. Direct my footsteps to the greater glory of thy name. Psalms 118, 113. 118, 113. Accept therefore the sacrifice which I bring in going out in public and in leaving my cherished retirement. I wish to offer more than my desires, God and King of my soul. I hope to be made able to suffer all that will conduce to thy greater service and pleasure purely for thy love, so that the longings of my soul may not remain entirely unfulfilled. Unquote. When our great queen came out of this vision, she called upon the 1,000 angels of her guard who appeared to her in bodily forms and told them of the command of the Most High. She asked them to assist her with careful solicitude in this journey, to teach her how to fulfill all the commands according to the greater pleasure of the Lord, to defend her and guard her from danger, so that she might conduct herself in all things during that journey in the most perfect manner. The holy princes, with wonderful devotion, offered to obey and serve her. In the same manner, the mistress of all prudence and humility was wont to act also on other occasions. For though she was herself more wise and more perfect in her deeds than the angels, yet because she was yet in the state of pilgrimage, and endowed with a nature lower than that of the angels, she was always solicitous to attain the plenitude of perfection, by consulting and asking for the aid of her guardian angels, though they were her inferiors in sanctity. Under their direction, as also by the promptings of the Holy Spirit, all her human actions were well disposed and well ordered. The heavenly spirits obeyed her with alacrity and punctuality, such as was proper to their nature and due to their queen and lady. They held sweet intercourse and delightful colloquy with her, and alternately with her they sang highest songs of praise and adoration of the Most High. At other times they conversed about the supernal mysteries of the incarnate Word, the hypostatic union, the sacrament of the redemption, the triumphs to be celebrated by him, the fruits and blessings accruing therefrom to mortals. It would necessitate lengthening out this work too much if I were to write all that has been revealed to me about these conversations. Oh, I would love to know. Excuse me. The humble spouse proceeded immediately to ask the consent of St. Joseph for executing the mandate of the Most High, and in her consummate prudence she said nothing of these happenings, but simply spoke to him in these words. Why does it keep doing Sorry, I saw something flashing on the screen. I think it's a reflection, though. Quote, "My Lord and spouse, by the divine light it was made known to me that through condescension of the Most High, the prayer of my cousin Elizabeth, the wife of Zacharias, has been heard. She has conceived a son, though she was sterile. Since she has obtained this singular blessing, I hope that through God's infinite bounty, her son will greatly please and glorify the Lord. I think that on this occasion I am under obligation to visit her and converse with her on certain things for her consolation and spiritual encouragement. If this is according to thy liking, my master, I will perform it with thy permission, for I am entirely subject to thy will and pleasure. Consider then what is best for me and command what I am to do." Unquote. This prudent silence of the Most Holy Mary, so full of humble subjection, was very agreeable to the Lord, for she showed herself thereby worthy and capable of receiving the deposit of the great sacraments. Of the King, Tobias 12:7. Therefore, or Tobit, I get the book of Tobit, which they removed from the Protestant Bibles. Therefore, on account of the confidence in his fidelity with which she proceeded, His Majesty disposed the most pure heart of Saint Joseph, giving him his divine light to act conformably to his will. This is the reward of the humble who ask for counsel, that they will find it with certainty and security. Ecclesiastes 32:29. It is also the peculiar prerogative of a holy and discreet zeal to be able to give prudent advice to those who ask. Full of this holy counsel, Saint Joseph answered our Queen, quote, "Thou knowest already, my lady and spouse, that my utmost desires are to serve thee with all diligence and attention, for I am bound to have this confidence in thy great virtue, that thou wilt not incline toward anything which is not according to the greater pleasure and glory of the Most High. And this is my belief also in regard to this journey. Lest thy making this journey alone and without the company of thy husband cause surprise, I will gladly go with thee and attend to thy wants on the way. Do thou appoint the day on which we shall depart together." Unquote. The Most Holy Mary thanked her prudent spouse Joseph for his loving solicitude and for his attentive cooperation with the will of God in whatever he knew to be for his service and honor. They both concluded to depart immediately on their visit to the house of St. Elizabeth, Luke 1:39, and prepared without delay the provisions, which consisted merely in a little fruit, bread and a few fishes, procured by St. Joseph. In addition to these, he borrowed an humble beast of burden in order to carry their provisions, and his spouse, the Queen of all creation. Forthwith they departed from Nazareth for Judea. The journey itself I will describe in the following chapter. On leaving their poor dwelling, the great mistress of the world knelt at the feet of her spouse Joseph and asked his blessing in order to begin the journey in the name of the Lord. The saint was abashed at the rare humility of his spouse, with which he had already been impressed by experience on so many other occasions. He hesitated, giving her his benediction, but the meek and sweet persistence of the Most Holy Mary overcame his objections, and he blessed her in the name of the Most High. The Heavenly Lady raised her eyes and her heart to God in order to direct her first steps toward the fulfillment of the divine pleasure, and willingly bearing along in her womb the only begotten of the Father and of her own, for the sanctification of John in that of his mother Elizabeth, and in that of his mother Elizabeth. Instruction which the Heavenly Queen and Lady gave me. My dearest daughter, many times I have confided and manifested to thee the love burning within my bosom, for I wish that it should be ardently rekindled within thy own, and that thou profit from the instruction which I give thee. Happy is the soul to which the Most High manifests his holy and perfect will, but more happy and blessed is he who puts into execution what he has learned. In many ways God shows to mortals the high ways and pathways of eternal life, by the Gospels and the Holy Scriptures, by the sacraments and the laws of the Holy Church, by the writings and examples of the saints, and especially by the obedience due to the guidings of its ministers, of whom His Majesty said, quote, "Whoever hears you hears me," unquote, for obeying them is the same as obeying the Lord himself. Whenever by any of these means thou hast come to the knowledge of the will of God, I desire thee to assume the wings of humility and obedience, and as if in ethereal flight, or like the quickest sunbeam, hasten to execute it, and thereby fulfill the divine pleasure. Besides these means of instruction, the Most High has still others in order to direct the soul, namely, he intimates his perfect will to them in a supernatural manner, and reveals to them many sacraments. This kind of instruction is of many and different degrees. Not all of them are common or ordinary to all souls, for the Lord dispenses his light in measure and weight. Wisdom 11:21. Sometimes he speaks to the heart with the interior feelings and commands, at others in correction, advising or instructing. Sometimes he moves the heart to ask him. At other times he proposes clearly what he desires, in order that the soul may be moved to fulfill it. Again he manifests, as in a clear mirror, great mysteries, in order that they may be seen and recognized by the intellect and loved by the will. But this great and infinite good is always sweet and commanding, powerful in giving the necessary help for obedience, just in his commands, quick in disposing circumstances so that he can be obeyed, notwithstanding all the impediments which hinder the fulfillment of his most holy will. In receiving this divine light, my daughter, I wish to see thee very attentive and very quick and diligent in following it up indeed. In order to hear this most delicate and spiritual voice of the Lord, it is necessary that the faculties of the soul be purged from earthly grossness, and that the creature live entirely according to the Spirit. For the animal man does not perceive the elevated things of the divinity. 1 Corinthians 2:14. Be attentive then to his secrets. Isaiah 24:16. And forget all that is of the outside. Listen, my daughter, and incline thy ear. Free thyself from all visible things. Psalms 44:11. And in order that thou mayest be diligent, cultivate love, for love is a fire which does not have its effect until the material is prepared. Therefore, let thy heart always be disposed and prepared. Whenever the Most High bids thee or communicates to thee anything for the welfare of souls, or especially for their eternal salvation, devote thyself to it entirely, for they are bought at an inestimable price of the blood of the Lamb and of divine love. Do not allow thyself to be hindered in this matter by thy own lowliness and bashfulness, but overcome the fear which restrains thee. For if thou thyself art of small value and usefulness, the Most High is rich. 1 Peter 1:18. Powerful, great, and by himself performs all things. Romans 10:12. Thy promptness and affection will not go without its reward, although I wish thee rather to be moved entirely by the pleasure of thy Lord. The journey of the Most Holy Mary on her visit to St. Elizabeth and her entrance into the house of Zacharias. Quote, and Mary rising up in those days, unquote, says the sacred text, quote, went into the hill country with haste into the city of Judea, unquote, Luke 1:39. This rising up of our heavenly Queen signified not only her exterior preparations in setting out from Nazareth on her journey, but it referred to the movement of her spirit and to the divine impulse and command which directed her to arise interiorly from the humble retirement which she had chosen in her humility. She arose, as it were, from the feet of the Most High, whose will and pleasure she eagerly sought to fulfill, like the lowliest handmaid, who, according to the word of David, Psalms 122:2, keeps her eyes fixed upon the hands of her mistress, awaiting her commands. Arising at the bidding of the Lord, she lovingly hastened to accomplish his most holy will in procuring without delay the sanctification of the precursor of the incarnate Word, who was yet held prisoner in the womb of Elizabeth by the bonds of original sin. This was the purpose and object of this journey. Therefore the Princess of Heaven arose and proceeded in diligent haste, as mentioned by the evangelist St. Luke. Leaving behind then the house of her father and forgetting her people, Psalms 44:11, the most chaste spouses, Mary and Joseph, pursued their way to the house of Zacharias in mountainous Judea. It was 26 leagues distant from Nazareth, and the greater part of the way was very rough and broken, unfit for such delicate and tender maiden. All the convenience at their disposal for the arduous undertaking was an humble beast on which she began and pursued her journey. Although it was intended solely for her comfort and service, yet Mary, the most humble and unpretentious of all creatures, many times dismounted and asked her spouse St. Joseph to share with her this commodity and to lighten the difficulties of the way by making use of the beast. Her discreet spouse never accepted this offer, and in order to yield somewhat to the solicitations of the heavenly lady, he permitted her now and then to walk with him part of the way, whenever it seemed to him that her delicate strength could sustain the exertion without too great fatigue. But soon he would again ask her, with great modesty and reverence, to accept of the slight alleviation, and the celestial queen would then obey, and again proceed on her way, seated in the saddle. Thus, alleviating their fatigue by humble and courteous contentions, the Most Holy Mary and Saint Joseph continued on their journey, making good use of each single moment. They proceeded alone, without accompaniment of any human creatures, but all the 1,000 angels which were set to guard the couch of Solomon, the Most Holy Mary, attended upon them. Canticles 3:7. Although the angels accompanied them in corporal form, serving their great Queen and her Most Holy Son in her womb, they were visible only to Mary. In the company of the angels and of Saint Joseph, the Mother of Grace journeyed along, filling the fields and the mountains with the sweetest fragrance of her presence and with the divine praises in which she unceasingly occupied herself. Sometimes she conversed with the angels, and alternately with them sang divine canticles concerning the different mysteries of the divinity and the works of creation and of the Incarnation. Thus ever anew the pure heart of the Immaculate Lady was inflamed by the ardors of divine love. In all this her spouse, Saint Joseph, contributed his share by maintaining a discreet silence and by allowing his beloved spouse to pursue the flights of her spirit, for, lost in highest contemplation, he was favored with some understanding of what was passing within her soul. At other times the two would converse with each other and speak about the salvation of souls and the mercies of the Lord, of the coming of the Redeemer, of the prophecies given to the ancient fathers concerning him, and of other mysteries and sacraments of the Most High. Something happened on the way which caused great wonder in her holy spouse Joseph. He loved his spouse most tenderly with a chaste and holy love, such as had been ordained in him by the special grace and dispensation of the divine love itself. Canticles 2:4. In addition to this privilege, which was certainly not a small one, the saint was naturally of the most noble and courteous disposition, and his manners were most pleasing and charming. All this produced in him a most discreet and loving solicitude, which was yet increased by the great holiness which he had seen from the beginning in his spouse, and which was ordained by heaven as the immediate object of all his privileges. Therefore the saint anxiously attended upon Most Holy Mary, and asked her many times whether she was tired or fatigued, and in what he could serve her on her journey. But as the Queen of Heaven already carried within the virginal chamber the divine fire of the incarnate Word, holy Joseph, without fathoming the real cause, experienced in his soul new reactions proceeding from the words and conversations of his beloved spouse. He felt himself so inflamed by divine love and imbued with such exalted knowledge of the mysteries touched upon in their conversations that he was entirely renewed and spiritualized by this burning interior light. The farther they proceeded and the more they conversed about these heavenly things, so much the stronger these affections grew, and he became aware that it was the words of his spouse which thus filled his heart with love and inflamed his will with divine ardor. That's beautiful. So great were these new sensations that the prudent Joseph could not help but pay the greatest attention to them. Although he knew that all this came to him through the mediation of Most Holy Mary, and although it was a wonderful consolation to him that she was the cause, he meditated upon it without curiosity, and, on account of his great modesty, he did not dare to ask her any questions. The Lord having ordained it thus, for it was not yet time, that he should know the sacrament of the King, which was already completed in her virginal womb. The heavenly princess beheld the interior of her spouse, knowing all that passed within his soul, and in her prudence she reflected how it would naturally be unavoidable that he should come to know of her pregnancy, for there would be no possibility of concealing it from her most beloved and chaste spouse. The great lady did not know at the time how God would arrange this matter, yet although she had not received any intimation or command to conceal this mystery, her heavenly prudence and discretion taught her that it would be proper to conceal it as a great sacrament, greater than all other mysteries. Therefore she kept it secret, saying not a word about it to her husband. Neither after the message of the angel, nor during this journey, nor later on, during the anxieties occasioned to Saint Joseph at becoming aware of her pregnancy. O admirable discretion and prudence more than human! The great Queen resigned herself entirely to the divine providence. hoping that God would arrange all things. Yet she felt anxiety and pain at the thought of what her husband might think, and of her inability to do anything in order to dissipate his anxiety. This anxiety was increased by the attentive care and service lavished by him upon her with so much love and affection, since his faithful services certainly deserved a corresponding return on her part as far as was prudently possible. Therefore, in loving solicitude and in pursuance of her desires to solve this coming difficulty, she prayed to the Lord, asking him to grant his divine assistance and guidance to Saint Joseph when it should arrive. In this state of suspense in which she found herself, her Highness performed great and heroic acts of faith, hope, and charity, of prudence, humility, patience, and fortitude, imbuing all her activity with the plenitude of holiness, and reaching in all things the summit of perfection. This journey was the first pilgrimage begun by the divine Word, 4 days after he had entered the world, for his most ardent love would not suffer any longer delay or procrastination in enkindling the fire which he came to scatter in the world. Luke 12:49, and in beginning his justification of mortals with his precursor. This haste he communicated also to his holy mother, in order that she might arise without delay and fly on her visit to Elizabeth. Luke 1:39. The most heavenly lady on this occasion served as the couch of the true Solomon, but much more richly adorned and more elegant, as Solomon himself infers in the Canticles, Canticle 3:9. Therefore, this journey was glorious and occasioned great joy to the only begotten of the Father. For he traveled at his ease in the virginal chamber of his mother, enjoying the sweet tokens of her love. At the time, she alone was the archive of this treasure, the secretary of so great a sacrament, and she adored him, blessed and admired him, spoke and listened to him, and answered him. She reverenced him and thanked him for herself and for all the human race, much more than all the men and angels together. In the course of the journey, which lasted 4 days, the two holy pilgrims, Mary and Joseph, exercised not only the virtues which were interior and had God for their immediate object, but also many other outward acts of charity toward their neighbors, for Mary could not remain idle at the sight of want. They did not find the same hospitable treatment at all the inns of the road, for some of the innkeepers, being more rude, treated them with slight consideration in accordance with their natural disposition. Others received them with true love inspired by divine grace. But the Mother of Mercy denied to no one such help as she could administer, and therefore, whenever she could decently do so, she hastened to visit and hunt up the poor, infirm and afflicted, helping them and consoling them and curing their sicknesses. I will not stop to relate all that happened on the way, but will only mention the good fortune of a poor sick girl whom our great Queen found in passing through a town on the first day of her journey. She was moved to tenderest compassion at the sight of her grievous illness, and making use of her power as mistress of the creature, she commanded the fever to leave the maiden, and the humours to recompose and reduce themselves to their natural state and condition. At this command, and at the sweet presence of the purest mother, the sick maiden was suddenly freed and healed from her pains of body and benefited in soul, so that afterwards she lived more and more perfectly and attained the state of sanctity. For the image of the authoress of her happiness remained stamped within her memory, and her heart was enkindled with a great love toward the heavenly lady, although she never again saw her, nor was the miracle ever made public. Having pursued their journey 4 days, the Most Holy Mary and her spouse arrived at the town of Judah, where Zachary and Elizabeth then lived. This was the special and proper time of the place where the parents of St. John lived for a while, and therefore the evangelist said St. Luke specifies it, calling it Judah, although the commentators have commonly believed that this was not the name of the town in which Elizabeth and Zacharias lived, but simply the name of the province, which was called Judah or Judea, just as for the same reason the mountains south of Jerusalem were called the mountains of Judea. But it was expressly revealed to me that the town was called Judah, and that the evangelist calls it by its proper name, although the learned expositors have understood by the name of Judah the province in which that town was situated. This confusion arose from the fact that some years after the death of Christ, the town Judah was destroyed, and that the commentators found no trace of such a town. They inferred that St. Luke meant the province and not a town. Thus the great differences of opinion in regard to the place where Most Holy Mary visited Elizabeth are easily explained. As holy obedience has enjoined upon me the duty of clearing up these doubts, On account of strange inconsistency in the sayings of learned men, I will also add to what I have already said, that the house in which the visitation took place was built upon the very spot on which now the faithful pilgrims who travel to or live in the Holy Land venerate the divine mysteries transacted during the visit, which I saw in a video on YouTube by a man who does virtual tours there. It's very interesting. Although the town of Judah itself, where the house of Zacharias stood, is ruined, the Lord did not permit the memory of the venerable locality in which those great mysteries transpired, and which were hallowed by the footsteps of Most Holy Mary, of Christ our Lord, and of the Baptist, as well as of his holy parents, to be blotted out and effaced from the memory of men. Therefore it was by divine influence that the ancient Christians built up those churches and restored the holy places, in order to preserve by the agency of divine light the traditional truth, and to renew the memory of the admirable sacraments. Thus we ourselves, the faithful of our times, can enjoy the blessing of venerating and worshiping the sacred localities, proclaiming and confessing our Catholic faith in the works of our redemption. How wonderful. For the better understanding of these things, let it be remembered that after the demon had become aware on Calvary that Christ our Lord was God and the Redeemer of men, he sought with incredible fury to blot out the remembrance of him from the land of the living, as Jeremiah says, Jeremiah 11:19, and the same is to be said of the memory of his most holy mother. Thus he managed to have the most holy cross hidden and buried underground, and to have it delivered as spoil of war to the Persians, and in the same way he procured the ruin and obliteration of many holy places. On this account the holy angels carried back and forth so many times the venerable and holy house of Loreto. For the same dragon who pursued the heavenly lady, Apocalypse 12:13, had already excited the minds of the inhabitants of that land to tear down and raze to the ground the most sacred oratory, which had been the workshop of the Most High in the mystery of the Incarnation. You should look up the House of Loreto. It's quite a thing. The same astute, and it's spelled Loretto, Loretto. Okay. The same astute hatred of the enemy urged him to blot out the town of Judah, aided partly by the negligence of the inhabitants who gradually died off, partly also by untoward events and happenings. Yet the Lord did not allow all traces of the house of Zachary to be effaced or obliterated on account of the sacraments which were there enacted. This town was distant from Nazareth, as I have said, 26 leagues, and about 2 leagues from Jerusalem, and it was situated in that part of the Judean mountains where the stream Sorek takes its rise. After the birth of St. John and the return of the Most Holy Mary and her spouse Joseph to Nazareth, St. Elizabeth received a divine revelation that a great calamity and slaughter impended over the infants of Bethlehem and its vicinity. And though this revelation was indeterminate and unclear, it nevertheless included the mother of St. John to betake herself with Zacharias her husband to Hebron, which was 8 leagues more or less from Jerusalem, for they were rich and noble, and they had dwellings not only in Judah and Hebron, but they had houses and possessions also in other places. When the Most Holy Mary and Joseph were on their way flying from Herod to Egypt, Matthew 2:14, after the birth of the Word, and some months after the birth of St. John, St. Elizabeth and Zacharias were in Hebron. Zacharias died 4 months after our Lord was born, which was 10 months after the birth of his son John. It seems to me I have now sufficiently solved this doubt, and it ought to be evident that the house of the visitation was neither in Jerusalem nor in Bethlehem nor in Hebron, but in a town called Judah. I saw that this is the true explanation which was made known to me by divine light, together with the other mysteries of this heavenly history. Afterwards, when I was constrained by obedience to ask about this matter, a holy angel made the same declaration to me. And I will end there for this evening. All praise and glory be to God in the highest. May God bless and keep you.